Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll give everyone about a minute to tune in as reminders are being sent and everyone is adjusting their volume and preparing to listen and learn today as we dive into Black Philanthropy Month, a tribute to legacy of resilience. Way to go. Thank you, Janae, for joining us. Yes, drop in the chat your name and where you are tuning in from. How are you, TT Morton? Thank you for joining us. We are so excited that you all could join us today in this virtual space and welcome. All right, Daryl, we see you. We see you. Dallas is in the house. Welcome. Welcome, Melvin. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi, Jasmine from Pittsburgh. Miss Miguel. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Marcus. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. Welcome to the third annual Black Philanthropy Month webinar hosted by Fundraising Academy at National University. We are so thrilled that you have chosen to join us today in this virtual space to hear from fundraisers in various industries who possess a wealth of information. Each of you are joining us from across the country, and we will provide a very robust conversation to ensure that we meet your expectations today. And today we're ready to get started. Each of us have a cause, and fundraising is why we are here today, because we want to learn more. And with your cause, you want to know how to fund it and fund it well, not just with minor or smaller increments, but significant increments. And today we'll talk to you live, and Fundraising Academy provides a variety of free webinars for you to learn how to fundraise using the fundraising cause cycle. There is a wonderful webinar that we're hosting today. Also, any previous webinars can be viewed in the portal for free. Additional information will be shared with you at the end of today's program. Thank you all for joining us, and we're going to dive right in. My name is LaShonda Williams, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as your moderator today. I am absolutely thrilled beyond measure to be in this virtual space with you for Black Philanthropy Month. I currently serve with Fundraising Academy as a trainer, which is absolutely an amazing experience where I get to share with each and every one of you. But in my full-time role, I work with Memorial Hermann Foundation in the medical healthcare area, which is absolutely fulfilling beyond measure. My experience spans from annual giving to major gifts, and I've had the opportunity to work in higher education for the majority of my career. Each of my roles have absolutely created opportunities for me to learn, to grow, and to garner philanthropic support. So I'm very grateful to have been affiliated with South Texas College of Law, Prairie View A&M University, and the University of Houston. And so now that you know just a little bit about me, we're going to go and dive into meeting our panelists. Our first panelist today I'd like to introduce to you is Mr. Christopher Beck, who currently serves as the Associate Director of Planned Giving at the High Museum in the Atlanta, Georgia. Chris possesses over 20 years of experience in fundraising with nonprofit organizations like ALSAC, St. Jude, the Boy Scouts of America in Nashville, Tennessee, and he is very active in the philanthropic community. He's been a part of numerous programs which provide training and mentoring for those that are new to the industry. He currently holds an education degree from Russ College, and he possesses a certification in diversity, equity, inclusion from the University of South Florida. He is also historic in some light that he was a part of AFP's first inaugural cohort leadership course for philanthropy. And in his spare time, when he is not garnering philanthropic support for various causes, he actually loves spending time with his wife and son. In addition, on the panel today, we have Miss Lisa Baxter. Lisa is my friend, my colleague in the industry, and she and I are absolutely kindred spirits in many regards. Lisa's mantra is very simple. She uses the mantra of Nelson Mandela: I never lose. I either win or learn. And we all have to possess that mindset as we are garnering philanthropic support for various organizations. Miss Lisa is absolutely phenomenal as well, possessing 18 years in fundraising. And she currently serves as the director of Tonality, which is a Grammy Award winning choir based out of Los Angeles that's committed to using music as a catalyst for social and justice change, which is absolutely phenomenal. Her experience spans from MLK Community Health Foundation, Make a Wish Greater Los Angeles, Children's Hospital, Big Brothers and Sisters. So she has a plethora of absolute great experience. She's been with AFP Los Angeles since 2018 and currently now serves as the president of the Los Angeles chapter. Miss Lisa loves her family too. She has a cool 11-year-old and just loves and adores her husband. They just recently celebrated an anniversary. Thank you for joining us, Miss Lisa. And we also have with us today the Nelson Bowman III, my dear colleague and friend of many years, who currently serves as the managing director with UNICEF USA. And in his role, he manages a team of frontline fundraisers across the United States of America. Talk about impact. And he's also served in a couple of other roles prior to joining UNICEF. Believe it or not, Mr. Nelson worked at the Prairie View A&M University as the executive director, my alma mater, and he led the very first capital campaign raising $30 million. And that's actually how we met. So Nelson is absolutely amazing. In addition, he utilized that opportunity to spread more knowledge across the academia space, and he co-authored 3 books. And those books were absolutely amazing. I've read them all, and there's something that you may want to pick up. And one of them is Unearthing the Promise and Potential, Our Nation's Historically Black Colleges and University, a guide for fundraising. He's also had a book that focuses on all campus approach, which included highlights from how to garner philanthropic support with staff giving. And he also has an essential guide to fundraising. And Nelson is a proud graduate of the Morehouse College and Prairie View A&M University's graduate program in community development. Like Lisa and Christopher, Nelson has an amazing family and he completely loves and adores his wife. And he has 1 son and 2 grandkids that he spends his spare time with. And for those of you who know me or may not know me, I spend lots of time with my mommy because I'm an only child. So welcome to our panelists and let's get this conversation started here. Very excited. Thank you all for including where you're from in the chat and your name, and welcome to the panel discussion. Today's webinar, we're going to explore a variety of different objectives. We're going to highlight Black philanthropy history. We're going to look at how we define philanthropy as a community, and then ways to overcome any challenges that you may have encountered, because these experts have encountered many things on many levels. So they're going to share with you some strategies that you can implement. We're also going to address how we can create a collective and how we can continue to garner philanthropic support. And we'll look at strategies that can help you with donor acquisition as well as retention. And what is most important to each and every one of us is our own professional growth and development. So we'll also identify some professional development engagement opportunities as well today. But before we get into the conversation, we want to take a quick poll to kind of know who's in the room now that you know about us. If you can respond to our poll, how many years of fundraising do you possess? Is it less than a year, 1 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 10? We want to know who's in the room to make sure that we're able to address all of those that are here based on their levels of experience. And it's looking like we have a variety of individuals with a lot of experience on this webinar today, which is amazing. Kudos to each and every one of you for joining us with such significant number of years of experience. This will only amplify your fundraising with additional knowledge as we talk about Black philanthropy today. And we're at 78% participation, and we'll be closing the poll soon. So if you've not had an opportunity to respond, please do so. We're almost there, and the poll has ended with 60%, I'm sorry, 78% of the respondents, and the majority of the individuals here today are, in fact, possessing over 10 years experience. So thank you so much for joining us. And one thing I want to remind each of you of today that I did not mention earlier on is today's session is CFRE point eligible. So for those of you who are constantly looking for opportunities to add on to your professional development, please make sure you note that. And now we're going to go to our second poll. We know how many years of experience you have, but then we also want to know more about you as an individual and your particular location. How many individuals are in your shop? What size shop do you work in? And that poll will be up. Are you working in a small shop where there are 10 or fewer? Are you in a medium shop or are you in a large shop? The size of your organization does matter because it will determine how many resources you have available to you, both time, monetary, as well as personnel. And it looks like we have a significant number of our respondents thus far that are showing that they're in larger shops. Our panelists today have worked in both smaller shops as well as large shops. So this is great. We'll be able to address each of you at whatever level that you're on. So we'll be able to personalize this quite significantly. And so now that we know who's in the room, we want you to share with us your why. Why did you join the panel discussion today in the chat? And if you can also share with us what you're looking to gain today, because we want to be able to meet your objection. We want to meet your goals, your expectations. And should time run out, we will definitely be responding to any questions that are in the chat throughout today and in our follow-up correspondence. Let us know why you joined today and what it is you'd like to learn. And so with that in mind, let's kind of talk about our panelists and their why. Lisa, share with us, why did you enter fundraising?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, LaShonda. Thank you to the Fundraising Academy, National University, and my peers, to inviting us to this very relevant conversation. So why did I choose fundraising? Well, I didn't. Fundraising actually chose me. I would have never picked this as my career. I had already been a school teacher, a yoga teacher, a publicist, a writer. So this part really surprised me because I was positioning myself for something more in the creative space. The way that it came to be 18 years of my life is that my godmother, Grace Trejo, she was the chief financial officer for Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And I became a temp. And the second time that I temped for them, one of the fundraisers was going on a month-long honeymoon. And so I was to assist in the Children's Miracle Network department, which is a corporate fundraising department, and, pour coffee and things like that. Well, I didn't pour not one pot of coffee. I just started fundraising and it was just innate. So if you go deeper, philanthropy is a part of my DNA. My parents, John and Ida Coleman, were always philanthropic. They always gave of their money. They opened up their home ministry. They were actually the co-founders of the African American Center for Evangelization for the Los Angeles Black Catholic community. And they were recognized by two popes for their service in South Central. So I really lived in, their philanthropy every day. My younger brothers and I are in roles that serve others. One's a principal and a nonprofit leader. The other one works in cancer research. So both of my parents are ancestors now, and philanthropy is how our family continues their legacy. So it has never for us been one of resilience. It's been more one of joy. So I didn't choose this life. It chose me. But above all, I will always go where God guides me, because for me, this is my purpose work. So here we are.
And that is absolutely an amazing story. And thinking about purpose, Chris, chime in, Christopher, let us know about your purpose and why did you choose fundraising?
Sure. Well, first of all, hello everybody. Yeah, I too, Lisa, I was a former school teacher, and I just felt like it was more. I felt like and this is no shade to any school teachers, but it at the time it kept me so confined. I felt like it was more out here to do, and I taught in an underserved a part of town, and I just felt like something was missing. And so I literally, I'm a person of faith. So I took a list. I made a list of my perfect job. And if my perfect job could be, it would be, I wrote all these things down. To make a long story short, I was given an opportunity, and it was so ironic. I got my first start with the Scouts, Boy Scouts of America. And that really opened my eyes up to a lot. Shout out to my man, Harold Witherspoon, who became my first boss, who gave me a chance. Harold took a chance on me and trained me the right way. And things kind of just went from there. And fast forward, 2020, like most of us, I was in a really dark spot in MOSIT, AADO. I see some of my MOSIT brothers on here. Those guys, Ken Miller, Bigger Bird, all those folks really helped me out of a really dark place in my life. And so this is how I give back, right? So now I'm stuck, right? This is kind of what we do. And to be able to share about Black Philanthropy Month, or to share during Black Philanthropy Month, is just huge, because I think our story is still being written and is not being shared properly. So here I am.
And Nelson, chime in. I'm seeing some continuity here with your responses.
So mine is not as eloquent as Lisa's or Chris. Somebody, a friend of mine, a colleague said, you know what, you'll make a great philanthropy officer. And I'm like, well, okay, what is that? She's like, development officer. I'm like, okay, well, what are we developing? Because, honestly, I didn't really know that this was a profession. And I'm talking, 20 years ago, all throughout high school or middle school, when it was career day, nobody came representing the fundraising industry or the philanthropy industry. I mean, police officer, lawyer, doctor, blah, blah, blah. And then there was nobody in my family that was a fundraiser. So I didn't have any role models. So, but at the time I was working corporate management, corporate sales, and had been doing that for a while and just really needed something more meaningful. I wanted to do something more meaningful while still being able to utilize the skill sets that I enjoyed so much, which is relationship building and, talking ad nauseum and stuff like that. So, my colleague was like, you can do all of those things. And then you get to do it at a HBCU. And you're a graduate of HBCU. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah. So I mean, I know the story. So that ought to be a pretty cool transition. And that's how it started. It was just that simple. Yeah. So somebody
And
saw in
simplicity
me
is,
what I didn't know in myself. How about that?
I love it. And simplicity sometimes is best. But with that, it was a gravitation, it was a calling, it was something unique about each and every one of us. And so, for each of you that are on the webinar today, I want to challenge you to self identify and volunteer for the career fair so that young people will know that there's actually career opportunities in philanthropy. Because, like Nelson, I was exposed to philanthropy by being a beneficiary. However, to know that it was a professional career, completely oblivious. So as we are going out into our various spaces and places, please make sure you connect with a local area high school and or university, your university, and be a representative to provide some knowledge for the youth and the next generation of our fundraising professionals. And now that we've had Lisa, Christopher, and Nelson's why, I'll share our results on organization size. We have a variety of individuals from a variety of sizes of organizations as we anticipated, which is why we were intentional today in making sure that we had representation across sectors when it comes to fundraising experience. And with that being said, we're going to dive into what we all do as fundraisers. First things first, let's look at some data. And so as we're looking into data, one of the first things that came to mind and that was consistent, Lisa as well as Christopher mentioned, which is their religious background and their connection to philanthropy. Giving USA 2024 data results, we all know we look to Giving USA because it is the most reputable source to identify where people are giving habits. And then it also provides a foundation for us as fundraisers to be able to develop our strategies in our respective industries. And topping the chart, no surprise. Are you surprised, Lisa, Nelson, or Chris, that religion's at the top of the chart for last year for giving?
No.
Nope.
No.
Yeah, I was
Always
absolutely
can.
not surprised at all. $146 billion That is a lot of revenue that was donated in charitable contributions to a religious entity, whether it be a private school that's religious based or an organization in itself. And looking at the table at a glance, there are two things that come to mind for me. One is either a significant number of philanthropists give to religious organizations, or two, a significant number of people are giving to religious organizations. But on either spectrum, this causes us to pause and think about the connection between Black Philanthropy Month and religion. And with that being said, we're going to go into testing our knowledge for just a moment. And this is an opportunity for you to test your knowledge. As fundraisers, we are often challenged with identifying linkage, ability, and interest, which is very important as we're going through the discovery process and we're identifying our prospective donors. What I'd like for each of you to do is to take a moment and at a glance, your first response. It doesn't necessarily have to be right, but we want to create a baseline for today's conversation. And so we have here listed the Morehouse College, Edward Waters College, Paul Quinn College, and Wilberforce University. And we want to know, what's the connection? What do you see? I could not put this poll up without including the Morehouse, because we have Mr. Nelson Bowman here with us, who's the proud Morehouse grad. We're getting our responses in. We're roughly at about 25% if you all can put in the poll. We'll wait for you to give you a couple more moments to collect your thoughts before we close out the poll. And I want to embark some knowledge upon you today. We're very excited about this conversation. So the poll has closed and we are looking at about 45% of you participated, and the results are in. 3% indicated that they were land grant institutions, 3% that they're private, 39% say that they are founded by African Methodist, Episcopal, and Baptist churches, and 56% say that they are HBCUs. Well, with every quiz, 2 answers are right, but in the context of today, we were looking for a specific answer. Yes, they are all historically Black colleges and universities, but today we are talking about, or just transitioned from, religion. Believe it or not, Wilberforce University was founded in 1856 by the Methodist Episcopal Church, which is the first African-American owned and operated HBCU. And Edward Waters College was founded in 1866, also by the AME Church. Paul Quinn was founded by AME preachers in 1872, and Morehouse College was founded in Augusta originally, as Augusta Institution, my apologies, in 1967 by Springfield Baptist Church. So that
Okay,
is
one correction, LaShonda,
Yes, ma'am.
1867.
Correct. Say it again, Nelson. I'm sorry, I missed you.
1867.
1867. So that is very important to each and every one of us, because it lets us know that philanthropy in the African-American community, one pivotal point is the church, which is a place of worship that many gathered. And so with that in mind, we are going to take another look. We're going to dive just a little bit deeper into the session. And we're transitioning on to our very next slide. So we want to test your knowledge just a little bit more. Now, for the sake of just kind of seeing where we are as a baseline again in the chat, please feel free to share with us the name of an historically African-American church that you may be familiar with in your city. And the purpose of us asking this question is because this is Black Philanthropy Month, and one of the pivotal points in the African-American community that allows the opportunity to convene is the church, which is dated back to during the time of slavery. And it was a place of refuge, and it was also the place of opportunity where the African-American community would convene. And so with that in mind, as you're placing your responses in the chat, I want to ask our panelists, are any of you surprised about how many HBCUs have the connection to a church background or a faith?
Nope.
Not surprised at all.
Been the blueprint.
It is definitely, it's
Yeah.
in the blueprint. And, we want to recognize that religion is very personal, but we also want to think about it from from a prospecting perspective, that it's really important that we're very cognitive of these things. So I'm going to embark just a little bit more knowledge with you today. The oldest documented African American church is Mother Bethel AME, which goes back to 1794 in Pennsylvania. So that gives us some context on how long people of color have been engaged in some form of philanthropic involvement, which is really important and it's notable. I'm in Houston, Texas, so our historical church is Antioch Missionary Baptist Church, which was founded in January 1866 by former slaves in Freedmanstown. So that is my fact for the city of Houston. We've got quite a few historical facts that are being posted in the chat, and thank you all for sharing your knowledge. And with this, we want to think about Black history from a historical context, providing you with an overview on the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about it from a historical concept, we want to think about today how we are defining philanthropy. Faith-based traditions often teach time, talent, and treasure as methods of giving, which sometimes contradicts our traditional definition of giving. And we saw clearly in the Giving USA report 2022 that religions top the charts. So that means that in religious spaces, we have a significant number of individuals who are supporting those organizations with three modalities: time, talent, and treasure. And as fundraising professionals, this is an opportunity for us to be able to connect closer with our prospective donors and current donors. So it's really important that we're very cognitive of that. Some of the other notable individuals that are African American philanthropists, one of the highly acclaimed that we all have heard about many times over is Madam C.J. Walker, who made a historic $5,000 gift in 1919 to the NAACP. And Tyrone Walker, I believe, Lisa, is
Tyrone McKinley Freeman.
There you go. Tyrone is the author of a book that highlights the importance and the value of her philanthropic support early on in the community. And so we're sharing the historical context because it's relevant and important as you are engaging with your donors. Many of us have heard about Oprah Winfrey's gifts and Denzel Washington's annual fundraisers, which are important. But moreover, unfortunately, Jay-Z and Beyonce are not in our portfolios. So that means that we really have to kind of meet people where they are, and we have to embrace looking at fundraising from a different perspective in terms of how we define fundraising and also questions that we are asking our prospective donors. And then when we're thinking about AME churches, as I mentioned to you earlier, dating back to the early 1700s, there are a significant number of faith-based organizations and churches within the African American community that have been providing philanthropic support in a myriad of ways, which include the Building Fund, the Education Fund, Benevolence Fund. The list goes on and on. So we as a people are philanthropic. It's a matter of honing in on what those things that are most important to us are. Today, we have numerous mega churches across the country, and we saw from Giving USA that that religious / faith-based giving is $1 billion industry. Can you imagine how much revenue is generated at many of our mega churches on an annual basis? How many of you know if any of your individuals in your portfolio are members of those churches? So I'm asking you to think about leaning in to asking some additional questions that are faith-based to your prospective donors, because it creates a unique opportunity for you to connect with them in a unique way. And so with that being said, Lisa shared earlier, as well as Christopher and Nelson, how they were introduced to philanthropy. So we want to ask you another question. So how were you introduced to philanthropy? And this is a really easy poll. And when we're thinking about the context of family, we're looking at it from the standpoint in which Lisa responded, meaning that the family was already philanthropic. It was a part of your fiber, your being, and your parents formally taught you. When we think about church, we're thinking about it from a faith perspective, that your parents were consistent with providing tithe and talked to you about the value and importance of tithing. And then from a community perspective, we're thinking about how those instances happen often in some of our communities where we provide informal loans that become gifts to relatives and or friends within the community or within your family. And then when we're thinking about volunteerism, we're defining that to include any social organizations that you're a part of, or any athletic organizations where you've done any grassroots type fundraising. And so we're looking at our respondents, and we have about 60% that have responded so far. And as the numbers come in, we're seeing so far that a significant number of you were introduced through volunteerism. And volunteerism is a great way to be introduced to philanthropy, because our ultimate goal is to be able to transition that volunteerism into philanthropic support. And volunteerism can happen in a variety of different capacities.
Mhm.
We're getting ready to close the poll here in a second, and our final results looks like are in. And 37% of you were introduced through volunteerism, which is not a surprise. Are any of you surprised?
No,
No.
it's not.
So
Yeah,
yeah, it's not.
it's all, like I said, it all makes sense.
It completely makes sense, because I can remember countless fundraisers, grassroots concept, of course, but yes, countless fundraisers. And with that in mind, now that we have some historical context, we're going to dive into these panelists. We want to know more about what you know about the industry, so that we all can learn something new, something that we can apply, something that is meaningful, and something that we did not know before arrival. So we're going to start with our very first question, which is, why is Black Philanthropy Month important to you? And we'll start with Lisa and transition over to Christopher.
Thank you, LaShonda. Yeah. So, Black Philanthropy Month, especially during this time of erasure of Black bodies in our history, it is really about continuing to put the world on notice of our legacy of human kindness and generosity. Our legacy has helped to birth and sustain nations, communities, families, churches, healthcare systems, the economy. According to the NAACP, our spending power exceeds like 1.7 trillion annually. I think of the various civil rights movement, voting rights, the list goes on. Black people have always, always led with philanthropy, and it's who we are first and foremost. And as you mentioned earlier, Tyrone McKinley Freeman's book, Madam C.J. Walker's Gospel of Giving, Black Women's Philanthropy during Jim Crow, and I actually put it in the chat if you guys want to buy it. He speaks about a group of scholars like Darlene Clark Hines, whose work provided three important constructs for his book. But I want to highlight the third construct, and this is, and I'm quoting it directly, which positions Black philanthropy within the collective consciousness of African Americans, which meant that giving was not just a skill or an activity, but a phenomenon that was fundamentally anchored within Black identity and Black bodies. So a phenomenon, by definition, is a remarkable person, thing, or event. So Black philanthropy is a phenomenon. It is remarkable. It's always been bigger than our struggles. It is ancestral, community-centered, relational. Like I said earlier, it's a blueprint for Black power, our collective success, and it amplifies our creativity, innovation, and most of all, our hearts. And I really feel like our younger generation needs to know the stock that they come from, and how historically we have paved the way through our kindness, generosity, joy, and love of the Lord. So these are just some of the reasons why Black Philanthropy Month is so important to me, and why it should be important to others.
Well said, Lisa. So look, I'll chime in. Just I think for me, going back to my first organization that I worked for, I had an underserved part of Nashville that I worked in, but it was amazing to me that it was, people were taking care of kids and grandkids and all the things, but they still gave. And I would go back to the office and kind of share about any issues that I would have, but it's like my colleagues, they couldn't really like comprehend kind of what was going on. Well, I realized that they were not out there. I'm seeing it all, right? But those people still gave. They gave $25 donations. They gave what they could, because at that time the families saw the kids, saw scouting as a way that the kids could get better, right? But I saw them giving more than just money. They gave time, they gave talent, treasure, like they gave it all. They left it on the table. But fast forward now, why is it so important, Black Philanthropy Month, to me? Is because we have to now address and highlight those things. I mean, the 6 T's, right? So now it's 6: time, talent, treasure, testimony, truth, and ties. All those things make up the Black culture and we have to talk about it. And I think the part now that with all the shifting that's happening in the world, organizations don't really they don't really understand that those T's, that's currency as well. So it's left up to us. We have to make sure, all of us that are on this call today and those who are not, we have to make sure that we are telling the stories of our community, but it can't just be us on the screen. Like, it has to be all of us doing this collectively. So that's why, and Black Philanthropy Month is not just one month, it's every month, y'all. It's every month. So let's get it done.
And Nelson?
So I think it's important because we need to celebrate that Black people have been philanthropic for centuries. But oftentimes in the literature that you read, the research, it shows us always on the recipient end rather than the giving end. But the data also shows that Black people historically have given a larger percentage of their discretionary income to nonprofits and charities than do whites. Doesn't always get reported. And talking about the church, and I put that my in the chat. I put my mama introduced me to it, but introduced me to philanthropy through the church. And I could be like, man, she always giving money to them people. We don't even really like them people. And when I say the people, meaning the people, the people in the pulpit
I'm
and all that
already
stuff.
there, Nelson.
I
Right.
got you. I got you.
Like, why you keep giving them money? Fast forward, my mom passed in 2008, and I got a chance to look at her financials. And so, what I noticed is that for like maybe 20 plus years, she gave anywhere from like $3,500 to $4,500 to the church annually. Well, you divide that by 12, any one of those numbers, and I mean, $100 a week, not that much. But my mom, in the height of her career, made $21,000 a year when she
Mm,
retired. That is over 19% of her take-home income. So they already took taxes out, FICA, blah, 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 Social Security. And she rolling it off like that. I'm mom. Is that why I couldn't get no Jordans? Well, I'm kidding.
No Jordans for you.
No Jordans for me. But and those exam that is just probably one of many examples that my colleagues on the call as well as those in the audience can cite to where philanthropy never came up in our conversations. Even when I started working at Prayer Review and told her, we never talked about her being a philanthropist, but she really was.
yeah.
And we did it because it was the right thing to do. We did it because that's what we do, and we do what we can. So I think if we have to recognize the history that we have in this space and not always follow that we're on the receiving end of it.
I couldn't say any better, and I have nothing to add. And this is why they are the panelists today. We're off to a very strong start. Christopher, you highlighted rather than three, there are 6 T's. And so, with that in mind, let's just take a few moments to think about fundraising as a whole. People give to people, it is a relationship driven industry. And so, thinking about that from a professional standpoint, what were possibly some challenges that you've encountered and how did you overcome said barriers? And we'll start with Nelson on this one. As he leads a team across the United States and he is located in anywhere USA.
Anywhere USA on any given day. Yeah.
I'm
Um,
jealous.
so I'm going to compare working at a historically Black college and university to now working for UNICEF USA. One of the things at the historically at PVAMU is that I had a built-in natural affinity group called alumni. And alumni, they share a personal lived experience with the institution. They studied there, built friendships, and carry an identity tied to the school. And so it almost like created a ready-made community with a strong sense of belonging and loyalty. Contrast that UNICEF and no affinity group. Donors and prospects, they may share like a common concern for children, global health, or disaster relief, but those are value-based affinities rather than identity-based ones. And because of that, we have to be very, very intentional about cultivating communities of support like interest groups, regional boards, young professional councils, or peer-to-peer fundraising networks. And that's just, one overarching example of the differences and how you have to work within your your box, your surroundings in order to make it work. So yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And now we're going to hear from Lisa, and then Christopher will chime on in.
Yeah, and kind of tagging on to Nelson's point, for most of my career, whenever I brought up diversifying our donor base to include people of the global majority, specifically Black folks, there was always pushback. I would always get, let's focus on our Jewish brothers and sisters. Let's discuss later, or my all-time favorite, a blank stare, right? So there is this like deeply rooted narrative, that Black people do not or did not have the means and could not ever be considered as viable donors. And all along, it's been because no one has asked them, because clearly we know that, right? Um, and I think about my father and mother, immigrants who came to this country with nothing, but they have positioned our family to continue their legacy. I mean, they had nothing, but they still tithed. They still gave to nonprofit organizations. They gave of their time, all the 6 T's. They did all of that, right? And we just have to continue to share with the world. We are giving, we are givers, whether it's our churches, fraternities, plan gifts. And if your donor pipeline is not inclusive, you are definitely leaving money on the table. Another thing that I have experienced consistently, unfortunately, is toxic leadership. And it has, it never really began that way. But soon you find yourself, caught up in what I call a cycle of from pet to threat, which is actually a term that was coined by Casey Thomas, where women of color, specifically Black women, are welcomed, into the organizations. They're the shiny new penny. And then when they start exhibiting leadership skills, then they are quietly told to, take several seats. And it railroads so many things. It's rampant. It kills morale. It kills missions. It kills your spirit. And people would say, well, it's you. It absolutely was me, because it was not me honoring myself, protecting my dignity, or realizing that, I was not in alignment. So I really learned how to fight in the spirit. I read books that helped me to refine my conflict resolution skills. I sought community. I will always stand on AFP, Association of Fundraising Professionals of Greater Los Angeles. They really saw me in my leadership. I humbled myself. I shrunk myself. Like, I did everything, But what I had to understand is that when you have leadership that is insecure, that cannot stand in your light, then it'll never work out. So the outcome is, leave places that can't hold you. And I know that I'm not talking to everybody, but that this has been my experience and some of my challenges, within the space.
So yeah, so I'm gonna echo everything Nelson and Lisa said, but I'm gonna come at it from a standpoint of one of the approaches that I've taken with this is educating my internal colleagues and external donor base kind of about philanthropy on the external piece, but on the internal piece, educating my colleagues who just don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And that's been really throughout my career, it's kind of been the whole space. And at least I echo, you go in and you talk about them and you say, well, look, hey, I know about this said organization or this individual, it's more than 3 Black people in Nashville that got money, I mean, that type of deal. But they only tend to know what they know, right? So, but if we're out here, we know the different community groups. I mean, we know about the power of fraternities and sororities and all the Black doctor groups and all the things, but they don't know about that. But when you bring it up to them, they say, okay, well, you know them, well, just go get the money. Well, no, has there been a relationship established initially, right? Because it's not gonna just, and I'll tell them off the top, just cause like I'm not the Black Moses, like just cause I'm here, I'm not about to go in here and just about to part the Red Sea with this. Like it's not gonna happen like this, right? But we have to build trust. And I think especially in this new age now, with the demographic shift happening right now, it's a real thing. And what I've been telling my non-melanated brothers and sisters is like if you're not building relationships with us right now, with communities of color right now, don't look to it in the next 2 to 5 years, because we're going to already have our partnerships. We are going to have the people that we trust and that are rolling with us. So if you don't start now, it's probably going to be too late.
You all shared some really great insight, and I will add just a little bit more to that in terms of the context of Black philanthropy. We started off the conversation talking about religion as a baseline, but another part of that, which has been brought out in the conversation among the panelists, is the important value of our organizations. There are a number of African American historic organizations, which include the Divine Nine, which are the sororities and fraternities. There's also the 100 Black Men, there are Links, there's the Boule. There are a myriad of African American organizations that are philanthropic, that are making significant impact within the community in every aspect, ranging from religion to environmental impact. And I'm a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, the first sorority of color, 1908. That is correct. And in addition to that, very proud that we established our first credit union. Go figure. We are a multi-million-dollar organization that's very philanthropic, that provide opportunities for leadership for up and coming leaders. We provide scholarships. We support healthcare groups and organizations. So making sure that in your space where you work, that you provide the knowledge with your colleagues is just the beginning of creating opportunity to amplify the voice of Black philanthropy. And you couldn't have said it better, that we're not always just recipients. We are definitely very benevolent with a foundation of philanthropic support. And with that in mind, I see my Sarah shout out, I see you. It's important that we think about the importance of transitioning affinity into philanthropy. So just like you enter the church or any congregation or faith-based institution, there has to be a courtship. You have to garner trust. Similar to the cost selling cycle, you start off with a list of prospects that you have to eventually qualify, and you discover new things. And over time, like Nelson's mother, they become devoted donors to your organization for a lifetime, which is our ultimate goal. So let's have a little spin on the conversation, have you all share with me how you've effectively transitioned affinity into philanthropy, specifically kind of looking at the volunteer space, because oftentimes volunteerism isn't really counted from a monetary standpoint when we're thinking about larger organizations. So let's have the conversation shift about how we transition those volunteers into becoming our financial supporters. And we will start with Nelson.
So again, I'll give you two perspectives. In the HBCU space, the alumni groups, the student giving campaigns, those were ways that I, were able to take volunteers that had forgotten about the university or didn't know enough about the university and bring them into the fold. And the reason I say they didn't know enough about the university, I'm referring to like the ones that were let's say on campus, and they were just going through the motions. Yeah, I mean, they didn't really care. They were mad because the financial aid office closed too soon, or they couldn't get more than one glass of milk per meal or whatever. They mad. And one of the things that I always knew was it is a lot easier to get in your face while you're there on campus than to hope you're gonna look back at me in your rearview mirror.
Hmm.
And that was the impetus for starting the student giving campaign. All right. Now I'll transition to UNICEF. And so I talked about not having a built-in affinity. There were no people to make impressions on, on campus because there's no campus. But advisory boards. And so currently we have 9 advisory boards in key cities throughout the United States: Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago, New York, Boston, LA, San Francisco, and I'm sure I'm leaving out one. And this is made up of a group of individuals, volunteers, anywhere from maybe 9 to 15. And their whole role is to expand the community of UNICEF supporters and create local connections with a focus on major donors. We give them 3 goals. Number one, you got to amplify giving, which means we want expect 100% giving, and that's at a minimum of $10,000 a year. We ask them to mobilize locally, meaning host and underwrite events in your neighborhood to engage new supporters, people that you don't know. And then the third one is growing the collective. So we want you to recruit and fundraise for people, recruit more members to the board in your community or whatever, and then fundraise from it. And one of the things that we do to recognize that effort, especially the fundraising part, is that any gets that you bring to the organization, meaning if I convince LaShonda to give to my organization, then as a part of my lifetime giving totals, her gets are a part of that. And there are recognition opportunities for gives and gets together. We don't separate the two because without your get, I wouldn't have. So, yeah,
That is a
that's how.
definitely excellent way to get people involved, and you did a dynamic job at PV and mobilizing those golden classes. Shout out to Miss Odie on the Zoom today. All right, Lisa, if you chime in for me.
Yeah, my superpower is creating community wherever I go. That is really my legacy. When I was at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, working in the corporate department, one of my accounts was Rite Aid, and so I created the Rite Aid Ambassador Program. At the time, there was 250 stores broken into regions. Everyone could not get to the hospital, but what I decided to do is bring the hospital to them. So I identified patients in each of those regions, had them attend regional meetings, go on store visits during campaign season. We had them show up for Miracle Day, which is an event where we bring a ton of managers and employees to the hospital, all the top cash wrap sellers, and they would enjoy a day at the hospital. They would have a tour. And, we just really kept the mission front and center. And it really helped us to meet all the overall campaign goals and in some instances exceed them. It also laid the groundwork for the formal youth-driven affinity groups that now are at the hospital. So I take a lot of pride in that. And I also want to point out that the first iteration of that did not work, and it's okay to try something and fail at it. I know that in our sector, that's not always looked at as but it's okay to do that because you have to, you have to do a couple of things to figure it out. Also, when I was at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, I worked with a lot of college students, and I wanted to really fill in the gap and figure out how can we keep them engaged, until while they transition into the adult world. So I created a young professionals group that focused on 3 medical departments, raising money for specialized equipment for the hospital. And in some instances, some of their parents would become donors. So not only would they be raising money for the hospital, but it was also a way to engage their parents. And they invited their parents on tours, they invited their friends. So it really was about how can we get and build this community. And then lastly, at After School All Stars Los Angeles and MLK, I created councils because going back to my point, I would always feel some type of way when I saw boards that never reflected the communities that they served. And so this was my way to combat that. And so, one of them, they started actually raising more money than the board. And the board, I think, got low-key embarrassed. And so they were like, oh no. So it kind of was like a fun competition for them. But honestly, that was by design. It was a strategy that I was like, you know what, I'm going to focus on the council and, let them grow. And they did. And so it's really nice to know that some of these councils do live on still today. And the best feeling is knowing that you created something with the community at heart and with their needs in mind, and that it's still thriving. So it's just a lot of listening, gaining consensus, including community members in the conversation. One of the things that I love about Tonality is that they have a singer representative sitting on the board. That is so community centric. So yeah.
Right. So yeah. So in my previous organization, so working for in my other organization and moving being here in Atlanta, a lot of the especially high net worth donors, excuse me, would always tell me that, "Oh, Christopher, I can't, like, I don't see myself in your mission. I don't see myself in the brand." And so to Lisa's point, I really took all that stuff to heart, and we were able to build an affinity, like almost like an advisory board made up of high net worth African American people. And from that we built a giving circle that centered around sickle cell. And so that way people could see themselves not only just in the mission, but that affects all of us, right? And so, and once we did that, we set a goal to raise like $100,000, and we were able to surpass that goal by $50,000 early with about 16 people, right? but they saw themselves in it. Now that was a little bit different from what people were used to at my previous organization, but I was doing it for the people, and I wanted to make sure that the community saw that I was listening to them. I didn't, because again, at that time I was new here in Atlanta, and I needed people to know that I wasn't just here to take, but I wanted to give, and they could see they could actually see their dollars making sense in a organization that wasn't here in the city. So I always go in and listen, and first, my first question is, do you see yourselves in the mission? And that helps me to build everything from there.
Again, this is why you all are on the panel. The summary of everything that you said is all inclusive. Nelson started with talking a little bit about higher education and introducing philanthropy to students through student giving, which is a major opportunity because you want to capitalize off of that captive audience in real time. Texas A&M, UT, and several other institutions across the country, Rice, have phenomenal student giving organizations and also parent giving organizations. In our roles in the philanthropic space, it's our charge to identify ways that we can connect individuals with our organizations. Our slogan with Memorial Hermann is advancing health and personalizing care. And Christopher gave the perfect example. Individuals said that they did not see an opportunity or an alignment for them. So he hence created an opportunity, making that connection, the linkage. He knew that they had the ability to give and they had the interest because of sickle cell, which was something that plagues our community more often than other communities. So when you're thinking about transitioning affinity into philanthropy, there are a variety of different aspects you can look at it from. Volunteerism, or where you have a captive audience with a said organization, and creating opportunities through volunteerism, which evolves into that philanthropic support. Individuals often say, that organization didn't ask me. And so it's really important that we continue to ask. And although we may be a little bit hesitant because we may not have gathered quite enough information, it's really important that we ask before we count a particular sector out because we just don't know what the capacity may be. And who knows if you make the correct connection that possibly they may transition some of their current philanthropic revenue to your organization with enough cultivation. And so thinking about that, our end goal is making the ask because we want to do that because we want our organizations to continue to thrive. We want to make impact in our respective roles in the communities in which we serve. We talked a little bit earlier about how we're defining philanthropy and looking beyond the monetary base. So when you think about this next question, think about it from a broad perspective. What was your most impactful gift acquisition and what made it most meaningful to you? And I'm going to lead that while you think about it. Nelson, you brought up something that was near and dear to my heart, and that is VPVAMU and the various groups that we have. And you, under your leadership, the golden classes were activated. And I can recall one specific instance where I had a donor contact me that wanted to know information that they had not received. And I was committed to securing this information because I want you to continue to support our organization. So as I gathered information, I asked a series of open-ended questions, which we do as professionals, and I got all the details and I met up with all the right people to secure the information and I scheduled a visit. The couple came to the campus and they were ready to talk to me because they wanted some information. And so, needless to say, we had made we'd arranged to have some students to come talk to those individuals so that they could hear from the students how their funds were used. And subsequently, that couple led the charge with their class to reinvest. And, for me, it wasn't about the dollar amount, it was about the wideness of their eyes in the moment where they saw the students who were recipients of said scholarship revenue. And so that to me was the big aha. So each of you, please chime in with your meaningful moment and why.
Yeah, I'll start. As you mentioned that, Lashonda, I was thinking about this man. He was a retired school teacher, and just like he would probably never show up on anybody's capacity rate rating or anything like that. And I'm proud in many ways because one, he was, when I met him, he was 85, about 84, 85. So you think about what era he grew up in. And I was probably the first person of color to come into his house. It was just him and his cats and all the things. And we developed a relationship. I'm seriously, it was him and his cats, right? And so
Oh my God.
but my first visit, he was like, Christopher, you're only going to get this, you're only going to get this amount out of me. And that was it. And I said, okay, that's fine. I said, look, I'm just going to stop by every now and again. He said, that was cool. He said, but would you have a glass of tea with me? And so before I left, we had a glass of tea. And on my way out, he said, well, you can stop by anytime that you're in the area. So we just developed a relationship, right? So I would see him about twice a year. And so a funding opportunity came up. And by this time I knew he had three accounts. All accounts had six-figure incomes in them, all the things, right? His funeral was paid for, everything. He was all set. So he had money. And so I eventually asked him for a major gift. Make a long story short, he got it. I mean, I got it. But it took me about 18 months. But I'm proud of that gift because we developed a relationship over time. We had to build trust. That was a new playing field for both of us. I mean, because he was very open about a lot of things. But it took time, and I wasn't going to rush him. And I think once he saw that I wasn't going to rush him, and that I was there for the right reason, it was to connect. He had the means to help, and I just wanted to ask for his help, and he allowed me to do that, and he did it. So that gift means a lot to me to this day. And yeah, he's a great guy. So anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Chris, for that because, trust is also a part of what my next story is. And I had worked with a very well-known bank for at least 5 years, and each time they would give us $15,000. Now, fast forward to a new role, it was a different time, and I knew them, I knew their language, what impact they wanted to make, what and the partnership benefit. So we eventually gave them the information they needed, and we were actually awarded $500,000. So when you talk about trust and time, that's definitely a part of it. So, and it was for a program that would shift both workforce and economic development for that community. And that was such a powerful thing. So I think the lesson in that was knowing your audience, what they need, and what would benefit them. Be courageous because in spite of at that time my leadership trying to steer the bank in another direction, I had to stick to my guns and shared a proposal that I knew would resonate with them. So you really got to listen to your gut, and I think we need to normalize that a little bit more. Also, patience, trust, and donors timetable. I have to work on the patience part, but that has always been some very invaluable advice that I've received. It's like, those hair videos on Instagram where you just have to trust the process. That's what I think this is really about because that's when the magic happens. Also, a second one that was very dear to my heart was securing funding to launch and sustain an employee wellness program and fund a position to lead it. At the beginning of COVID, one of our nurses unalived themselves, and it was heartbreaking. So doctors, nurses, employees all around the country needed some serious care at that time. But the additional layer of heaviness of the racial and medical injustices that plague our healthcare system, especially in South Central, Watts, all the surrounding areas that are predominantly Black and Brown. It just really felt insurmountable at that time. So we were able to get funding for this program so that we can give the employees what they needed, and that was like art therapy, a book club, yoga, meditation, all the things that would really help put them at ease. The program took a bit to take off, but that's because we had to build trust. We had to build trust with the employees. And I also had to build trust with the funder that this was actually going to make a difference. And it's still going on now. So the lesson is sometimes you have to fight and you really have to hold the line if you know that it's something that's going to help your community. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, mm, my first six-figure gift. So, one of the things about me and being in this profession, coming from corporate America, sales and whatever, I love that cha-ching, you know? And I can remember that first six-figure gift like it was yesterday. It was an initiative while we were doing the capital campaign at Prairie View, and we had gotten the database clean finally, and I was able to kind of personalize and come up with some newsletter type material, send it out. And one day I got a call. And this lady didn't really seem like she was wanting to be bothered, but what is this I just got in my mailbox? And I mean, can you tell me a little about it? And so, I'm about building relationships sight unseen. So I just started rattling off, and she kind of, set up because it sounded like she was laying down. And lo and behold, fast forward, this is a 90s graduate. Okay. She was a dentist, independent, and she dropped 100 grand. We had never met yet. So, it was like, oh, this is on. This is on and popping. My initiative, you know, this is somebody I mean, she's an alum, but she's younger than I am. Come on. And it's so funny. So as I was preparing, for this webinar with you guys today, I was just going back looking through some stuff and actually found the newsletter online. Not that I sent her, but the one that I actually showcased her in with one of those dummy checks where she was giving the first award from the $100,000 scholarship that we ended up endowing to the first recipient. And I text her and I said, you know what? You wouldn't believe this. I'm sitting here preparing for this event on Wednesday. And I just came across it and I screenshotted it and sent it to her. She's like, oh my God, memories. So Jeff Shaw, VP at PV, I see you out there. I don't know if you know this person. I'm not gonna say it in this space, but you call me because she's still alive and kicking and still doing what she does.
Love that. I mean, thinking about how to compartmentalize everything that's shared, it brings to mind presentation is important. And during the presentation process, when you're preparing to meet with your donors, you have to ask the right open-ended questions to be able to truly capture that connection and to make sure that you're personalizing that opportunity as much as possible. Nelson, you gave an exquisite example of how
Mm.
patience and not counting someone out is very important in this space because you never know who the millionaire next door is, especially in the African American community, because in many instances, most philanthropists in the African American community are not very boastful or braggadocious, and they tend to channel and funnel a lot of their revenue in the church. And if you're not
Mhm.
familiar with those larger churches or institutions, you're doing a disservice to yourself because you might see LaShonda Williams' name on one of those benches. And trust me, that came with a hefty price tag. And so that is just one example of how African Americans are recognized within the church. But moreover, we want to make sure that we do our due diligence and never count anyone out, and that we provide them with an opportunity to give by inviting. The number one reason why people don't give is because they're not asked. And so in each instance, we all had to prepare something. I had to resolve an issue. Whew, and I was so grateful for the reinvestment. Lisa, you started new initiatives. Nelson, you started new initiatives, and you had the patience and the resilience, the fortitude to speak through, to ask the pertinent questions and have the patience, because ultimately it pays off. Now, our ultimate goal is to transition, the affinity into philanthropy, but every person in fundraising, if you don't have major gifts along with the ultimate gift as a part of your plan, you're missing out on an opportunity. And that opportunity can definitely be transformational for your organization. So we're going to lean into lifelong relationships with individuals. And Christopher, you gave an excellent example of how you cultivated that relationship and engaged that gentleman over 18 months and secured a gift beyond what he initially thought he would give. And so let's talk a little bit about planned giving, because that's really important and time is winding down. And I want to make sure that we touch on planned giving because it's an opportunity for individuals who may not give as much during their lifetime, but in their post-mortem world, they're able to make more significant gifts. And Christopher has significant experience in planned giving. So I'll let you lead the conversation with what are some strategies that you've implemented to help you with building a successful planned giving program? What are some things that we can do?
Yeah. One thing I would say, especially for those donors, what I call milestone years, if they've been given 5, 10, 15 years, those are prime plan giving prospects, right? So you can go in and have some really in-depth and meaty conversation just to ask them, hey, you've been with us these many years and your collective giving is X. Why have you been there? Just go in and just talk with them about that. And I will guarantee you they will be blown away at because they don't even know. A lot of donors are just on auto repeat, right? But if you go in and also it lets them know that you're really listening to them and that you care about them as people, which that really says a whole lot. And then the other piece I would say, and I've done this personally, right? One of the gifts I got, it was a donor that was given $15 a year. They went from 15 to 5,000 to 5,000 to 10. And eventually we started talking about IRA rollovers and all the things, right? So that year I got them to give 15,000. But they were older, didn't have any kids. And one day I didn't want to do it over the phone, but it happened. We ended up talking about their legacy. And that opened up the whole door for us to have a real meaty conversation around the legacy. And by that time, that IRA had grew to about over $2 million at that time. And so I kind of just went for it. She opened the door. The door was open for me to have a conversation with them about that. And so we talked about legacy. And make a long story short, we ended up getting over $2 million gift from them. But again, that gift took about 3 years to do though in time, because again, going from 15K to 2 million, over 2 million, that's some work. So
That is significant and transformational.
and
Nelson, you worked with PV for quite a while, and I know you've got a couple of planned gifts under your sleeve. Do tell some of your sweet secrets.
Well, okay. So I don't have a lot of playing gifts under my sleeve because I'm more so on the major gift side, but I've got some great stories, anecdotes here. As Chris said, it's always a part of the conversation. And I've
Mhm.
learned that, you don't have to wait till the people about to kick the bucket to start talking about it. The sooner you put that bug in their ear, it
Mhm.
gets the wheels to rolling. And especially when you've got individuals that are like maybe on their second gift with you. So there's already a trust being built.
Mhm.
And so here's a story. A person on my team last year, on my major gifts team, was working with our planned giving team. So we have two separate teams, right? And they strictly deal with planned giving opportunities. I strictly deal with major gifts. But the donor was very interested in giving to a program that he wanted to create after he passed. Well, it's kind of hard to oversee something in the direction of it if you ain't here no more. So the planned giving team brought my colleague in to talk about designing this program, and they eventually convinced him to do it while he was alive, but the funds would not be transferred until he died.
Mhm.
I mean, one of the most incredible collaborations that I have ever seen. The team actually won an award from UNICEF Global because it was so innovative. Working with somebody that's going to die at some point, such that they can be a part of the design of the gift that's going to benefit blah 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 afterwards. The gift was $12 million, largest collaboration, where both of the teams got recognition, soft credit for the gift. And I, you talk about a prime example of what you can do by making recommendation. That's a prime example of what you can do by making recommendations. So yeah.
Presentation was stellar.
So,
Lisa, you've worked in the healthcare space, the music industry, social justice organizations. Tell us about planned giving from your perspective.
yeah, I haven't had as much experience as maybe some of the other gentlemen, but right now at Tonality, my first goal a month ago was just to begin meeting with the stakeholders. So the inflection point here is conversation, right? Having those face to face, and that's the strategy to begin the conversation. Get to know them, understand what's important to them, and what they want their legacy to look like. As a result, now I've only been at Tonality for 1 month, okay? So as a result from these conversations, one of our board members wants to champion creating a plan giving program at Tonality and wants to work with me to build it. And I think that is such a beautiful thing that I have been in this role 1 month and our board member is stepping up and saying, let's be intentional about engaging others in this way. This is how you build community. And again, many times it just starts with a conversation. So don't be afraid to have them and leave room for these types of partnerships to unfold.
Absolutely. I echo all of those sentiments. And for those of you who may not be as familiar with working with African American donors, generally speaking, planned gifts are kind of taboo. We don't necessarily want to be proactive about thinking about our transition, but it is a significant opportunity if you have donors that possess a strong affinity for your organization. And as Chris mentioned, have given with consistency, because there's definitely an opportunity. And I think about, as a single individual who does not have children, I often receive lots of mailers because I've reached a certain point I've reached a certain age. And so it's really interesting, the organizations that do send me information. And to my surprise, many of those institutions that send me information about opportunities to make a planned gift are not those that I currently give to. So
Mhm.
you have to begin the conversation. It's a great opportunity. Yes, we want to fund right now, but we also want to provide the opportunity for those that want to leave a legacy. And if you've taken that CFRE exam, there's one question that made me laugh on the test. And that question was, who was your top planned giving donor? And the incoming joke was the single female. And sure enough, there it was on the test. So my apologies for sharing that one question, but that is the answer that everyone should know. So with that in mind, we definitely want to leave time for questions. So I'm going to ask our panelists to kind of give us a close out statement, and we want you all to drop some questions in the chat. The chat has been very busy. We appreciate all that you've been sharing, as you are echoing the sentiment of the panelists and uplifting, as well as providing insight. Our final question to them, and we're going to try to wrap it really tight so that we have time for questions, is going to be looking at your career, just kind of looking back on the career. What would you tell your younger self entering philanthropy as you have experienced it for 2 decades? What advice would you give your younger self? And we will start with the lovely Lisa.
Well, I would say Maya Angelou was onto something when she said success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and how you do it. That relationships are your time, relationships and time are your currency. So treat them both with honor and respect. Don't overstay your welcome at any organization. Um, Pray and you are enough. Do not shrink for a nan, nobody. So that's what I would say.
Okay, Christopher.
Yeah, I would say this, and the guys from Most know we talk about this all the time, right? Especially with everything that's going on in the world now. Please, on this call, if you don't have community guys on this call, find your community. This work is it would take as much as you give it right now, but you can't do it alone, especially in today's time. So please, please, please find your community. And secondly, don't let anybody make you doubt that you know this work. You know this work. Stay true to your guns and find your community.
And Nelson.
Two mantras that I carry, and these are both learned behaviors. Number one, in philanthropy, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That was never more evident when I got the PV and my first development job. I knew everything. I was an HBCU grad, not that one, but not from there. But I knew about the College of Engineering, nursing, blah, blah, blah. And they would look at me like, where you from? You're not from around here, no. No, I'm not. They didn't really care about that because they needed to know where my heart was.
Yeah.
That's number one. And then number two, recognize and realizing that a no response is not always a reflection of you. Sometimes it means that the relationship building is still in progress.
That's right.
Maybe it means not right now. You don't know what those people may be going through. They
That's
might
right.
be putting the kid through college. They might be about to bring in a parent or senior citizen into their home. It's not no forever, but it's just not right now. And then the third one is that I know for me, when I just don't feel like being bothered, my default response is no. I don't care what the question was. It may not have been a no, a yes or no question, but people will sometimes, oh no, no. Well, you didn't even know the one question. So don't internalize things that's always about you. Understand that this is a process. Relationships are not built overnight. They call those quickies, and those are never as meaningful as thoughtful gifts to your organization. And like I said, people don't care how much or how smart you are until they know how much you care. Find that organization where that's your philanthropic sweet spot. That's your jam. Now you might not be able to do that with your first development job because you got to get in where you fit in. But you need to be thinking, where am I going to land at some point? Because in my 20th year of doing this, my sweet spot is the are children, and so I'm down with it. That's what I want to do. It's not nature, it's not medicine, it's not the arts, it's not education. It is children. So
Mhm.
full stop.
Full stop. We talked about the importance in the historical context of Black Philanthropy Month, and we provided a historical foundation, kind of going back all the way to the 1700s and looking at Giving USA, how it highlights the significant number or the significant amount of gifts garnered in the religious space based on faith-based giving. At this point, we'd like to yield to you if you have any questions, if you can pop them in the Q&A or in the chat. But in the meantime, one of the things that I would say to the younger me is become involved. We talked about the importance of relationships and relationships with people, giving to people, and that means creating community. And creating community means joining your local AFP chapter. There is the African American Development Officers Group, there's the Mosaic Group, there is healthcare professionals. There are a variety of organizations, those that are specific to fundraising as it relates to the arts. You want to get to know as many people as you can, because those individuals can become not only your lifelong friends, but they can become your mentors. They become your confidants, and they also can become your cheerleaders in moments of doubt. And so it's important that as fundraisers that we hold ourselves to a higher standard to make sure that we continue to build community as we are charged with creating relationships on behalf of our organizations to garner and amplify philanthropic support to further our causes. And so it's just really important that we're very cognitive and intentional with making sure that we also stay abreast of current trends in our respective roles and industries of philanthropy. Thank you, Mr. Allen, for dropping a link in for individuals to look at another organization as a source for building community. If you have questions, please make sure that you drop them in the chat. And if you don't have questions, then I will give our panelists one more quick question that we looked at, and then we'll conclude today's session. So overall, when you think about the relevance of Black Philanthropy Month, and we've covered a variety of different areas of discussion, what would you say is your call to action for the individuals on this line, whether they are in the fundraising community, whether they're a volunteer who's just interested in learning more? What is your call to action? If you can give our attendees today one call of action, what's the call of action you'd ask them to do?
I would always say, and this is something that I've learned over time, that you have to begin with your heart. Much to Nelson's point, is that you have to be in alignment. Everything needs to be alignment. We spend so much time talking about how to, have the best donors and best data and all of that. But if your heart is not ready to do this work, then it's not going to happen. This is not just about raising money or what have you. This is really about creating communities that are rooted in health and joy and wellness and, all these different things. And so really prepare your heart for this work, because it will really take you far. And another thing that I learned is, the faith, like putting God first in this work, fighting not in the flesh, but in the spirit. It takes a very different cadence, and it shows up in your work very differently. So that's what I would say.
I would tag on to something Chris said, and also LaShonda, about getting involved, having community. Um, One of the first things that I did when I got in this business and I mean, I didn't know to do this, but we had a consultant at PV at the time, and she insisted that I join AFP, Association of Fundraising Professionals. And, it put me in a space with like-minded individuals that I, I didn't even know the community existed. And then the other thing is that find you a mentor. You can't know this stuff if you don't know this stuff. And like I said, there were no role models in my family or in my neighborhood, and nobody I knew that did that. So I needed a role model. And he, this was an older white gentleman, 20 years my senior, that worked at a private, private highfalutin high school here in Houston, and we're still friends today. He walked me through some of my first promotion conversations that I was going to have. So you don't have to do this alone, and you don't have to do this by yourself. So be willing to be humble enough to say, I could just use some help. Because I mean, especially if you're a person of color in this space, I don't know what the numbers are right now, but when I started, it was like 1 to 2% persons of color, which included all people of color. So the black people was probably, I don't know, whatever that percentage is. Maybe 20 years later, it's a little bit more. I don't know. But it's, find you some community. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll close going back to what I said earlier, make sure, and this kind of just echoes everything everybody else has said. Please, I can't stress it enough. Find community and get in it. And like LaShonda said, get involved. We all know this work, when you're in this skin, is a heavy lift. It's emotional labor, all the things. You have to find community. And I know some of us, I've been fortunate enough to, be around a lot of good people. So I get my support, but I know a lot of us don't. And don't be prideful and basically suffer in silence. So find your community.
And with that said, we're very excited that we've got some really good feedback in the chat. And we want to kind of sum it up. I often lead with mission, passion, purpose. When they align, it makes your work very easy. It's not work, it becomes a part of the fiber of your being, a fiber of your existence. And to connect with donors in a meaningful way, you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable and allow them to, just like you're asking them to share about themselves, you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable and share with them. And if there are instances where you are not as familiar with a particular cultural base, I say seek your community of practice, talk with your colleagues, because there are instances where you think you may be prepared to engage with a prospective donor, but you get to the meeting and you realize that perhaps you're not as prepared as you want to be or you ought to be. So you have to be willing to be vulnerable and admit what you don't know, not only to yourself, but seek help, because it's very important for you to be successful is to admit that. There are a variety of resources that are readily available for you today. We're very excited about having such a meaningful and impactful discussion today. We're very thankful for our guests, the panelists who have shared their knowledge and their professional experience, but most importantly, they showed up as their authentic self. There are instances where individuals may suffer from imposter syndrome and often have to code switch. And you know what I'm referencing. Code switching is something that often happens in the African American community. But today, I thank you so much for showing up as yourselves and also being completely engaged. And for those participants today that have been here, I'd like to share with you some additional opportunities where you can seek additional knowledge that is readily available for you through the Fundraising Academy. You mentioned earlier in the chat, how can you connect with us? Each of us are on LinkedIn, and we are always accepting opportunities to connect with new people to build our community. Because as we mentioned, community is very important. These individuals I've known for quite a while, and I've had some really great, meaningful conversations that have not only been uplifting and empowering, but they've also embarked their knowledge upon me and sharing with me their experiences, which has been very beneficial to me in making decisions and being a guiding light. Nelson has been a reference on many occasions, and Christopher has been Truly a great ear, and my sister Lisa definitely she's a guiding light in all aspects, and we connect on a very spiritual level. So it was great to have each and every one of you to join us today. We're so excited. We're going to transition over to the next slide to share with those that are tuned in today, in case if they want additional information. Make sure that you have registered for our no-cost learning portal with the Fundraising Academy. You're able to view this webinar along with other webinars that can support your learning. Today, we talked about going through the cause selling cycle, which includes the discovery process, which we call, prospecting. We've also touched on preparing for that initial meeting. Presentation is very important. We've talked a little bit about stewardship and the ultimate gift that we all are seeking, which is the planned giving gift. There's a variety of different webinars that are available to you. You will also receive a follow-up email from today's session, which will include how you can access this particular webinar. And then we'll transition over to the very next slide. Next month, another free webinar with your CFRE credit, 1.5 hours. Why professional development is essential for every fundraiser, which is what we ended on. It's very important to learn more about fundraising, professional development opportunities. Please make sure that you register for the free webinar. And then we will conclude today by saying thank you to each and every one of you for what you do in the profession. Continue to show up as your authentic self. Knowledge is power, and be sure to share knowledge, the knowledge that you gained today with your colleagues. And we hope that you've enjoyed today's presentation. If there are any questions in the chat that we've not addressed, they will be a part of the follow-up email. Thank you all for your time today, and best wishes to you and your organization.
Thank you.
Hey guys, bye everybody.
Bye.